she as she fought to reduce, is that on my screen or yours?
That's yours.
Okay, sorry, let me just take that off. Sorry. I don't see it. Oh, it's gone. Okay, sorry. Share my screen again. As she rallied folks to sort of look for another way against a highway expansion that was happening in Florida. And I want to share another quote. This is from V. Fixmer Ores, who's a planner in Iowa City. And she talks a little more about the types of communities that I work with. And she calls them, she say, I say underestimated because I think underrepresented or under-resourced are actually inaccurate. I think we actually know how to resource ourselves very well. It just looks very different than what is status quo. So when I say I work with communities for pushing engineering, research, and education, I'd like to use V's definition and use the term underestimated communities for the work that I do. And so today what I wanted to do is just do a little bit about me, some of the drivers for this work, some pivotal points in my career so far, and then talk about some of the current projects and how we're integrating community engaged work, and then do a wrap up. And the 4 projects that I'll be talking about that are current are the symbol, the logos are listed there. So I was born in Guyana in South America, the only English-speaking country in South America. And I like to say that I am Belizeable or Belizean now, and that is the only English-speaking country in Central America, which has been quite essential or central to a lot of the work that I do. After going there, starting really in 2014 on a research project. At USF, I'm based in Tampa, and I did sabbatical in 2013 in Barbados, where I had an opportunity to work in 9 Caribbean countries, visiting over 100 high schools by one of the Caribbean's largest insurance companies that was sort of birthed in the Caribbean and is now sort of based in Tampa and Arizona. And then in terms of project sites that I'll be talking about today, projects going all the way up in the Midwest in Iowa, and then of course, Belize, Barbados, and in the Virgin Islands also, and in Miami. Oh, one other thing, the picture there, I'm in San Andreas in Colombia, having gone diving, looking at some of the coral restoration work there. And I say that because I hope to go in the water with Landolph on Sunday to see some of the sea hive projects that you all have here in Miami. So I love the water now. But I'm one of those engineers that started to dive very late in life, and took some of my students into the sea in Barbados in 2014 for the first time. And I was like, if we work on wastewater and we're always talking about treating to standards so that you don't, impact the marine environment, well, have we actually ever gone down there to see what we're impacting and what that looks like? And that was sort of life-changing for our work. So some of the drivers for centering communities that I wanted to talk about are listed here, and I'll go through each in detail on the next few slides. So in terms of institutional commitments, I remember it was August 2004 when I started at University of South Florida. They asked to come a week early because the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, the director was visiting, and the director of the minority PhD program was visiting, and we were putting our first grant to them. The idea was you would get funding to support minority PhDs, and they would fund you so that you got 1 or 2 students above baseline. For much of our college in 2014, we had never graduated any represented minority students. And for the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, this is US-based minority students, right? And so that was sort of my introduction to engineering, to teaching. And right now we became a center of excellence under the Sloan Foundation. And we've grown significantly in the number of students that we have graduated that are underrepresented minority students in the science and engineering fields in the US. The other thing that happened in 2006 was that USF became a community engaged university. It's Carnegie classification. So you normally hear about, being R1, high research productivity, but we're also community engaged. And this started in 2006, and we were part of that inaugural class. University of Miami, of course, you guys know, is also, I think, community engaged classified since 2015. But that from an institutional level sort of set the stage that said, it is okay to work with communities that are around the university. And we had a mayor and a president at our university and a community leader from one of our community redevelopment areas. This is one of the largest in Florida, that had sort of decided that we were going to sort of do work around that CRA, as they're called. Have you guys heard of CRAs before? So it's communities it's areas that have been, in the language that is used, is that are experiencing blight, where a percentage of your property taxes could be reinvested into economic development in the communities. So I'm not sure about the Miami area, but in Tampa, one of our downtown areas that was pretty fancy at one point became a CRA because things went the other way. And then you could take up to 25%, I think, of your property taxes and reinvest. And that's now one of the areas that's really wealthy in Tampa. But the CRA I was looking at was East Tampa, which is a majority African-American community that unfortunately is still quite facing still some of the challenges that we were facing back in 2006. The other thing to look at is professional requirements. So ABET right now includes language. This is for engineering certification that talks about, the importance to consider public health, safety, and welfare, that students must be able to communicate effectively with diverse audiences, and that they need to come up with solutions that, are global, that have impacts that are global, economic, environmental, and society, and take into consider societal context as well. So when we as faculty start to write up what our own student learning outcomes look like and how we align our classes and course objectives with that, we find that some of the courses that include or integrate working with communities that are external to the university help to meet some of these requirements, right? And then the American Society of Civil Engineers came up with the policy statement talking about UN Sustainable Development Goals. So again, these are just drivers for when you're developing curriculum or your grants or so on that sort of tell you what direction you want to go in. And this was updated in 2023, I think July of this year, that says engineers need to be engaged in addressing the needs of disadvantaged communities through capacity building and the development of sustainable and appropriate solutions to poverty. So they use disadvantaged. I said I like underestimated. Some people used marginalized. So there's always a discussion on, the term, but it's normally communities that have not been part of a lot of the decision-making processes when it comes to infrastructure that we work with. Other driver is key people. And so I just have a few of them up here. There's so many more. Evangeline Best was that community leader who years ago in 2006 helped USF become a community engaged research, Carnegie classified research institution. And she was the chair of the East Tampa Community Revitalization Partnership and ex-social worker, and someone who really taught me the importance of being accountable to community, how you always come back, how you always engage, how you always share. And unfortunately, what happened with USF and the East Tampa is a lot of the documentation. At one point, there were over 100 projects. Our Office of Community Engagement sort of changed direction, and that information sort of disappeared from our websites. And so there's still sort of work that needs to be done to sort of retell the story. of how we became a community engaged institution, and how some of us actually still do work in community like East Tampa. Dr. Rebecca Zarga is from anthropology. We do quite a few projects together. We teach interdisciplinary courses together. Any students here take courses in anthropology? Any engineering students? I would encourage you to do it. It's not terribly easy the way courses are designed and your schedules are designed, but we've had the opportunity through many different types of interdisciplinary training grants to develop courses where both engineers and anthropologists and sometimes marine scientists take the courses together. And so we've been working very closely with Dr. Zarga since probably 2013, 2004, 2012, actually. And so really instrumental in the work I do. My sister is also a professor, and so for a very long time has roped me into many of the initiatives that she's in charge of or leads. She's a professor of women and gender studies in Toronto, but also not a founder, but a member of a group called Red Thread Women's Organization. So it's based in Guyana, grassroots organization. Currently what they're doing, they have a project right now learning about the gas and the oil industry, as Guyana is now an oil producing nation. And so these women are going through courses together, learning about this industry, and then coming up with sort of questions that they have. They're in communities learning from the fishermen there that things have changed. And so thinking of how to give voice to grassroots observations of what's happening. Dr. Tiara Moore is the founder and chair of Black and Marine Sciences. And so we started working, I think it was during COVID, we were in a online conference and she was giving a talk, and I sort of reached out and we were writing a proposal about the blue economy. And since then, she's been working with me since 2021 and on 2 projects. And in terms of just after she finished her graduate studies, went on to do a postdoc with the Nature Conservancy, but that was to start her organization. They now have NSF funding, are really looking at how to make environments, in particular in marine sciences, much more inclusive to in particular persons who look like Tiara. And Lisa Khan, who is the marine biologist and founder and executive director of Fragments of Hope. And what I learned a lot from Lisa, this is based in Belize, is being really committed to community where you live and being committed to building capacity and ensuring that jobs are created with the work that you do. And I'll talk a little more about Lisa when I speak about one of the other projects we have. But the community-based organization there has developed or has put energy into coral restoration work, and they now have one of the best examples of coral restoration in the world. So it's important to honor this sort of people who kind of inspire and drive and make you grounded that, you need to engage properly with communities with whom you work. And then the other is the incentives. As faculty, we are always looking for money, and we are always writing proposals to support our students and our research. And more recently, there have been investments in Justice 40, which says, that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments must flow to disadvantaged or underestimated communities. And so many of the federal agencies are looking for ways in which energy projects, water projects, how do they actually meet this target? And communities themselves are looking at the agencies to say, well, you are not meeting this target because you might invest in a carbon sequestration project and research on that, and then justify benefits to the communities that are underestimated and live all around your power plant, justify it by saying that in the long term, you're going to reduce air pollution, increase resilience to climate change. Never mind, you're still left with all of the fly ash stacks that are, that are surrounding your neighborhood. So when it rains, that still washes into your yards. So communities are also really keen and being better equipped to hold us and others accountable who are saying they're meeting Justice 40 targets. And then there are international incentives in terms of financing. So work in Belize, work in Guyana, many places in the Caribbean are now going after climate financing, and the Green Climate Fund is one of the largest funding entities to do this type of work. All projects have to do, lots of different initiatives that are committed to stakeholder engagement, gender action plans, and now looking a lot more at providing access to civil society. So there are these larger incentives that are also driving the type of work that I'll talk about a lot more in the projects that I discuss. Some pivotal points in centering communities in my career. I forgot what year it was, probably 2008 or so, we had a new dean for graduate research, Dr. Delcy Durham, and the state gave USF $13 million for the graduate school. She took some of that and said, I'm going to create a fund up to $500,000 per proposal. I'm going to bring all of you together. We're going to speed date. And then you're going to put proposals together for that $500,000. And the proposals had to develop new courses that were interdisciplinary. So that was sort of a seed planted that many of us in our new program, in our environmental engineering group, that we took advantage of. And so the picture here is a class in 2009 where we went to Guyana to look at mercury pollution. And the lesson learned there is having the right partner on the ground, in particular going into mining communities where there are many different challenges. And me being Guyanese, thinking that this, I'd never been to this place before. It turned out the partner didn't even meet us to go in. But luckily, we had two other graduate students from Guyana who were with us. And one, through her church, was able to connect us with people in the mining community that made it possible to do the work. So there, lesson learned from that one, but that was a funding incentive. And so through that, I continue to do interdisciplinary work, even though after that incentive, it's sort of like it became difficult to do interdisciplinary work because of how departments were funded, right? So you're incentivized, and then it sort of changes a little. We also had a People, Prosperity, and Planet grant from the EPA. So these are student-driven grants. And at the time, I had students who were working in East Tampa, working in the schools through other NSF funds. So NSF had a proposal, a funding entity, a grant that would place graduate students to shadow teachers. It was called GK Stars. And we had that at our university. And many of the, in East Tampa, it's 7 square miles and has 7 stormwater ponds. Many are fenced. The community considers them blight and wants the fences removed. And so they were investing and doing that with some of their tax incentive funds. And so what we have there is we had gotten up to phase 2, had been able to go to DC. It was great. That sort of like a lot of our work in training students, training teachers were around the stormwater pond projects that are going in East Tampa, lots of curriculum development. In 2014, we had a partnership for international research and education, and that was bringing anthropology and marine and engineering, and students were working on projects together, looking at reuse for wastewater. And this one student here, Dr. Christy Prouty now, was based in Belize, and that's where we actually students and faculty in the same location. So under the PIRE, some students went to labs in Europe, and it was like one student going to a lab somewhere else. And Belize was the one place where we actually had everyone, the students and the faculty involved. And it was watching Dr. Prouty's work and how she engaged in that community that sort of led to the large COPE grant that we currently have. In 2016, I have here my first time teaching a course called Envision Sustainable Communities, which is through the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, and it's now something adopted by ASCE. looking at sustainable infrastructure credentialing, right? So just better ways to build, to conceptualize, develop, build, maintain infrastructure. That course, so 2011, it's this wonderful idea working on stormwater ponds with kids and so on, right? In 2016, that course started because in 2015, Lena Young Green, who I showed in the first slide with a quotation, was the one person from Tampa who stood up in one of our city council meetings and spoke against a highway expansion project. The next year was 2016, and by then, the meeting went from 6 p.m. I don't know if any of you have ever gone to some of these meetings where you're allowed to speak for 3 minutes. It went from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. So the first year, when people were opposing this highway expansion project, it was just Lena. The second time, it was from 6 p.m. until 1 a.m. And I went with some of my students. I was shocked that, I had some personal things that I was dealing with at the time, personal loss. And so I wasn't very familiar with all the initiatives or activities that were going on. But once I found out, I was there, like, just involved. And through that, I was advised to sort of think about Envision as a way for students to think about infrastructure and maybe could lend solutions to this. That didn't quite pan out, as there were interventions that sort of limited the engagement on a transportation process. But that's where this was born. That's where sort of my eyes opened, that working in communities like East Tampa, there's so much more infrastructure to consider, rather than just this idea of doing STEM curriculum for kids or for the schools there. It's the highways that surround the community. It's a lack of power, decision-making spaces. So it's sort of this more holistic approach to how infrastructure decisions are made. And I did have a graduate student, Maya Carrasquillo, who's now at UC Berkeley, that sort of came to start working at the time. And I was like, oh, you're going to do stormwater infrastructure and you're going to look at, working with the churches to grow plants that could be put in there. And she was like, no, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to look at these more environmental justice issues. So that was pretty pivotal around 2016. In 2019, we got a national research traineeship, and this is a field course now. So building on Dr. Proudy's experience, we now had funding to develop the courses, to take students into the field together, and to work with community members to identify the direction of research the students are going to take. And here we have Mr. Lowell Godfrey, allowing our students to interview him. He was wonderful, sat for over an hour and let them videotape and learn how to do the interviews. He has since died, but he's one of the first seaweed farmers in Belize and has been instrumental for building the seaweed farming industry there. And then right now in 2021, a Blue Economy Convergence Accelerator project. So 2021, it's a 1-year project for actually 9 months. And you write your proposal and then you get to NSF and they say, well, we have this curriculum. You're going to attend class every week. You're going to learn about science. You're going to learn about human-centered design, and you're going to learn about storytelling. And that happened and has been also really pivotal, because on the human-centered design portion, in particular, because Dr. Zargar is a partner on this project, we really were able to get phase 2 funding that allows us to really spend more time, more resources, and more money with our community partners that we work with. So in terms of current projects now, and sort of talking about how sort of that experience, those experiences inform the work that I currently do, I'm going to discuss 4 projects that are funded through the National Science Foundation. So one is working to eradicate racism in science and engineering. It's call it We Rise. It's a collaborative project with UC Berkeley, with the CDC of Tampa as a partner. The picture here is showing some of our students, our undergraduates, graduates, and faculty in civil and environmental engineering at USF, as well as UC Berkeley, who participated in a workshop this past May. And the idea is that this, I have Dr. Michelle Henderson circled in yellow there. So she graduated from our program. She actually was part of an undergraduate research experience when I PI'd that years ago. And then we recruited her. She came and did her PhD with us, I think her master's too. And then she got an American Society of Engineering Education e-fellowship last year. And so she is working. So she didn't do her PhD with me as her advisor, but she has me as her colleague now as an e-fellow with ASCE. So she's a postdoc and has been really leading a lot of our connections and interactions with East Tampa right now. And one of those is this class that was taken in spring of this year, taught by my colleague Christian Wells from anthropology and Dr. Henderson, where their students in environmental justice seminar were working on East Tampa. They were interested in the stormwater ponds, the past, the present, the future. But they also wanted to, do some anthropological and ethnographic work. And so Dr. Henderson was able to set something up with the Jazzy Seniors of East Tampa. And the students were able to interview them and ask questions about infrastructure, but also about their lives. And so what we together is some of the, we brought in a professional photographer. We've done videos on it, but the quotations that align with infrastructure, we've also included in sort of a book that's now on USF Library that I'm using in my current class to show my students sort of, here's a quotation. What do you take here about the infrastructure someone is talking about? What could be improved? And so using information developed by one class to bring into another class. But the idea with the We Rise project is that we obviously want to build community engaged curriculum for our students. We want to impact on student learning, and this is in particular undergraduate students. And we want to look at the impact on faculty teaching. And again, the topic is eradicating racism in science and in engineering, and really looking at infrastructural projects and seeing where do systemic biases or issues arise, and then figuring out how do we get past them so that we actually develop infrastructure that is built for everyone. The class that I'm teaching this semester is again focused on stormwater ponds. It said there were 31 in East Tampa and only 2 have had some beautification going on. There was a really large one that the community had wanted to beautify since 2012, I think. But after the housing crash, the property taxes, you weren't generating as much. And so and then prices went up. So they were never able to do this one. It drains some of the larger state-run roads. And so they've also been deepened and they look terrible. I didn't put any pictures of what it looks like now, but it looks terrible. It's full of algae and it's right in the heart of community. And they've always gone through activities on what this could be and what this could look like. So the students are going to apply the Envision credentials to that, or the Envision criteria. And we have here in yellow Dominique Cobb, who is a community advisory committee member for this grant and a community advocate, sort of, giving a tour of her neighborhood. And something that she's working on now is sort of turning her area into a neighborhood association as you figure and figuring out ways in which they can have more decision-making power around infrastructure in our city. The other grant is the advanced grant that it's called Spaces. Oh, I didn't put a title on here. See, I always forget what the acronym stands for. And CY is a partner on this grant. It's led by Clarkson University. And this project really looks at how does, or part of it looks at, can community engaged work really encourage and support underrepresented minority women faculty to stay in and thrive in engineering? And the image here, not sure if Dr. Kira Hobbs, in the middle there, this was a workshop in 2019 at the Association of Environmental Engineering and Science Professors Conference, where we were looking at community engaged work. There's a publication that came out from the workshop that kind of helped to center and encourage us to put in the advanced grant, which really looks at changing the culture of not only our discipline of environmental or civil and environmental engineering, but also believing that we could change the culture of engineering in general. And we speak a lot about environmental engineering because I think we've made a lot more headroads in terms of having more diverse faculty, more diverse students, and also having students who are interested in community engaged work. And so we feel that we lead the engineering field in changing how we do business. And we think this is the direction in which business is going to be going. And then the other project is called Blue Gap, or the Blue Green Action Platform, and various partners on this project too. The goal is really to broaden the coalition of people aware of and fighting to reduce nitrogen pollution. So this is the project that went through the human-centered design and the storytelling. We got the phase 2, and phase 2 says, okay, you're going to come in and take a class from Stanford's business school, because in a year and a half, you're going to turn out a business or a nonprofit, as we're trying to do. Our goals are to raise awareness, really be able to provide stories, data, and action items for people to sort of advocate and take actions that help to reduce nitrogen pollution. Many folks, many researchers work on technologies to, for wastewater, for stormwater, and so on. And we feel it's not necessarily a technology fix that we need, right, to stop the harmful algal blooms or stop the red tide blooms that we feel in Tampa Bay. It's a lot more, and it needs to be sort of policy leverage points. And the way to get to that is really, we think, having a groundswell of support of people who are working together to do this. And so another goal is, of course, empowering communities. And I have here just some images, because storytelling, something that jumped out as we were going through our human-centered design process. With the grants, we actually have resources to do this. And so we are doing a documentary called Harm in the Water that Black and Marine Science is leading, but we're also doing mini short videos that we hope, will grab folks where they are. And I'll just give an example of one of our community alliance members. These are community members who are working with us over the grant, who we're really following, like, what are they doing, and then figuring out what is what does their system look like? How are they engaging with nitrogen, and what are their action items, and what are the things that need to be told? And so we have them as I said, community alliance members. And so this is one, and his name is Seth Watkins, and he is a farmer in Iowa. I'm just gonna play a little video. It's only a minute, and let me see. Like, people on Zoom can probably hear. Hear what Seth talks. This sound is by Professor Edwin Charles, who is a music professor here. He's got some original music.
use a crop rotation, I don't have to use as much nitrogen on my farm. And that saves me $40, $50, $60 an acre. When I get better with my cover crops, as I've gotten better with my cover crops, I haven't had to use as many chemicals. So I'm not an organic farmer yet, and I may get there someday. But what I'm learning quickly is that the more we work with nature, the more resiliency we build into our farms, but also the more profitable farms become because we're not buying inputs and exporting that money from our community. And I guess the final part of it, when you think about just where I live in Iowa, there's 16 million acres of corn land. All of us could reduce our nitrogen use by 50 or 60 pounds an acre with some very simple practices. And that might not sound like a lot, but at the end of the day, that's about $1 billion across our entire state. Divide that by 99 counties, that's $10 million for every county in rural Iowa that could stay there, where we could use it to spend on our schools, to spend on our kids, to spend on better infrastructure for where we live and make it a better place.
So that's our first video that it just finished, and it still has a little bit of tweaks, but that was the idea, to show sort of, you know, places that people might grab you, so that then you come on and then you learn a little more about what Seth is doing. Or we could use these in community settings to share and start conversations. And so we hope to do that with many people who have been videoing so far. Another person who we've been working closely with is Walter Smith. And so he actually works with the Sierra Club in their Against Coal campaign, a Tampa native, and he normally leads a toxic bus tour to somewhere called Progress Village, which is another historic African-American community in Tampa that's located really close to our power plant. And for Earth Day last year, Walter said, I want to have an environmental justice and health fair for Earth Day. He's like, we're not going downtown. We're not going to the museum. We're not going to the aquarium. We're going to have it in Progress Village, and we're going to do it at the Victory AME Church. And he wanted to have people who could come and, you know, measure with equalizers and stuff like that to measure, indicate, what do you call them? Respirometers to look at health issues. He wanted to put in purple air, you know, really affordable air quality monitors so that we could start collecting some PM 2.5 data and just starting to make the community start to collect data, right? Of course, with the health part, didn't have enough time, but hopefully for next year, we'll get some entities involved who could really lend support and collect data. For us, it's sort of like, oh, do you have IRB? Like, how does this go if you're going to be collecting information from people? But what we have here is our team from Blue Gap also said, oh, well, there is a connection because vehicular air emissions are one of the inputs for nitrogen into the atmosphere and into our water bodies. And that is one of the drivers for asthma in particular in urban communities. So yes, start with a PM 2.5. And I was talking to Yang about this yesterday, Dr. Wang, about how to make this connection between PM 2.5 and something like NOx in the coming from your cars. And he was explaining how difficult it is to sense for NOx, but even that discussion is what is important to have with community. It's say you started with this, it's cheap, you could put it here, you could find out, you know, PM 2.5 levels. If you wanted to find out more about something like NOx, which might affect more your asthma that you're experiencing, here's the instrument, here's the cost. You don't need it on a church. It might need to go somewhere else. And here's the government entity that can fit in. So those are the types of conversations that we hope to get from something like this as we work through Walter's story on nitrogen. And I have a colleague, Dr. Amy Stewart at USF, who has been doing some work on the air quality monitors. And so some of her students have been helping to give the presentations here with Walter. And then we're using undergrads who are supported by the We Rise grant to also engage in this work. I have like 5 more minutes. So the last project is on strong coasts, equitable solutions with nature and people. And Landolf and Prannoy and Edgar are all partners on this project. The University of Miami is one of the 7 academic institutions, part of Strong Coast. We also have 2 non-governmental organizations and 1 community-based organization. And the idea is really that communities are going to experience, create, and value societal, ecological, engineered structural resilience. And this will result in a continuum of solutions that depend on climate change, climate and weather distress, and localized immediate crises of loss of biodiversity, and so on. We're focusing on coral reefs and mangroves as those 2 nature-based solutions. And we're doing this in Miami, in the Virgin Islands, and in Belize, looking really to partner with communities that are selecting sites within each geography to really work with people there to think about what does equity look like when we're talking about nature-based solutions. And so we want to have sites that, there are biophysical opportunities for nature-based solutions, but then there are also partnership relationships to do this work. And then a suite of other things in the center here that guide our selection of sites, and also considerations like, is there a license to operate there? Is there agreement from our internal team and our partners? Can we acquire data? Is there a connection to policy? And I could say from experience so far, we have done, 2 workshops on this in Belize. And at one of them, at the end, there were 10 different we only had 10 tables. So there were 10 different sites that were suggested where people worked through. So we have quite a bit of work in sort of trying to identify the specific areas where we'll be working. The idea behind Strong Coast, or the way that we see how the work is structured, is that engaging communities is really critical. And we have faculty here, Kenneth Broad and Scottney Evans, who are leading the work for the University of Miami, but it's also Dr. Zargar from anthropology at USF, and colleagues from the East Carolina University that are helping with the work in the US, in the Virgin Islands, and saying that community engaged piece centers our work, informs what all other research thrusts do. And the other research thrusts are modeling the coastal hazard risk, so really looking at how waves are reduced by mangroves and coral reefs, and then testing and valuing that risk reduction and benefits, and then modeling co-benefits and informing decisions. Co-benefits, you might put a sea hive down, but a sea hive might be habitat for lobster. It might be a place that tourists may come to see after the corals start to grow. It would be a nursery because it's supporting mangroves for fisheries. And so being able to quantify all of those benefits becomes really important, in particular when working with communities, and ultimately to have impact on decision science analysis and policy and financing. Some of the initiatives for broadening participation that are linked under community engagement, driven or supported by work from our partnered organizations like Black and Marine Sciences and the activities that they do, and many of the other grants that our team members have that are committed to broadening participation. We're working to recruit community fellows in each location, to paying community fellows, and to integrating community fellows on our team, and also targeting recruitment strategies for our project. And then training on community-driven research, not just for the students involved, but also for faculty and community members too, building on global competency and building on NSF investments like the National Research Traineeship that I talked about and showed a picture of earlier. Here we have one of our fellows in the center in orange, Chris-Ann Hines, who's in anthropology, finishing up her PhD now, where she started in Belize, being able to do social network analysis and bring some of the systems thinking training into facilitating a meeting in Belize that happened in September. So really good to see our students sort of move into to be able to work and see the fruits of their labor in this way. In terms of community being part of the co-design process, we're looking at community expertise, perceptions, values, priorities. I forgot who I was talking with yesterday, but the idea was, you know, communities already, like people, they already know some of the challenges, the issues, and the solutions. We just need to create spaces where engineers could also be present to co-create even probably better solutions together. They have information on changing coastal dynamics that need to be taken into consideration. Oh, it was Dr. Solo Gabriel. I think we were talking about community knowledge and knowing where, you know, waste tanks were that are informing sort of what is in the water now, that if you didn't have that conversation, you may not know what was there, what was happening before. And then really to find out how mangroves, reefs impact livelihoods, because these are the things that are most important to people on the ground. Some of the results from our Belize workshop is that, you know, governance challenges are real. They're a major issue. Lack of enforcement results in unregulated coastal development, seen as a primary driver of undesirable coastal environmental change right now. So we're talking about a grant looking at climate change, running climate change models to sort of, you know, figure out our interventions. But the more pressing or immediate things that folks are dealing with are these issues of enforcement and governance. And so we're trying to wrap our heads around some of these workshops that we're now starting to think about how our project responds to these more immediate needs that communities might have. And in wrapping up, I was just going to end with another quote by V, and I must say I learned a lot from V, and this is just from interviewing and meeting her a few times with Strong Coast. But even from one conversation, it's sort of like, yeah, I provide childcare services, the times that I hold meetings, the community organizations that she pays to sort of lead the meetings. Those types of things start to get integrated in the grants that we write, so that now we can, well, with NSF, you can't provide babysitting, but you could provide, you know, be otherwise considerate for community members' time. And so this is a quote that she has. It says, I think the ways that we approach planning are that we build relationships. And typically we understand that community leaders, and there's community leaders in every community, are the ones that are going to have the buy-in from their community. So it's really about making sure that we're going to the people and we're not asking people to come down. We're also moving at the speed of trust. And I love that, moving at the speed of trust. And that is something that Adrienne Murray Brown, oh, it's not showing, Emergent Strategies is the book that she has, where this term has been coined. And that is really important when working with communities. You move at the speed of trust. Many engineers may not have had that opportunity to do this type of engagement, but there are others at the university, or there are others in your circles who have. And so it's really about partnering and having that person or that group be the one to bring you into this type of work. With that, I will say thank you and end. And am I at 45? Oops, I went 5 minutes over. So sorry about that, but thank you so much.